Yantif. Today is Chav Kislev, Rosh Hashanah of Hasidus, holiday of liberation of the Alter Rebbe. And we are learning now with the Daf Yomi. We're up to Pesachim 15a, the second line. This is Sugya we learned yesterday. We started learning yesterday, the Mishnah of Krasnianski. It's one of the more complex pieces of Talmud. We had a lot of fun with this in Yeshiva. The laws of purity and impurity. But just to briefly review, so the Mishnah says that Rabbi Krasnianski taught that they would burn the kachim that was impure, even though it was only impure with a child, an offshoot of impurity, together with the meat of the kachim, of the holy, the sacred meat that was impure with a source of impurity. We call it avatuma. Avatuma is a source of impurity, and then tuma is transmittable, but with each transmission it grows weaker and weaker. So we have the ultimate tuma, the ultimate, which is avi avaisatum, the grandfather of all impurities. That's the corpse itself, a human corpse. And with someone who touches the human corpse becomes a source, an avatum. When the avatuma touches either a utensil or a utensil, or is that for friendship circle? What is that for? If they transmit if they touch a utensil, a person, food, or a drink, it becomes an offshoot of impurity. And then you have a secondary, like a grandson of impurity, at the second level. And for chulin, it stops there. Teruma continues up until the third transmission, and then it stops there. And for kachim, which is the most sacred, the food from the sacrifice, there you even have a fourth, a great grandson, a fourth level. And that's where it stops. So he says that even though by burning them together, you're going to cause the two meats to touch each other, and you're going to elevate the level of impurity, we don't care. And even though you're not allowed to cause impurity to something sacred, so here you're causing impurity, you're elevating the level of impurity. Since they're being burnt anyway, it doesn't matter. Rabbi Akiva added, and he says not only is it okay to add from a third degree of impurity, a third offshoot of impurity, to a second degree of impurity, you can even add to a first degree of impurity. That oil of truma that became impure, that was nifsal, you're allowed to light it. What do you do with oil that's impure? Oil of kachim, you have to burn. You can't use it. But oil of truma that's impure, you also have to give it to the kohen. And the kohen, you can't eat from it, you can't use it in your food, but the kohen could use it to burn, to light a fire, to kindle a light, to use it as a fuel. So he says you're allowed to take this oil that was puzzled, which is like a third degree, and you're allowed to put it in the candelabra, which touched someone who touched the dead corpse. So by putting it in the if it's, and here the Gemara has a discussion, if it's metal, then you're actually, by pouring the oil, now the oil becomes a first degree. That's what Rabbi Akiva is adding. Rabbi Akiva is adding that even though you're adding to the impurity, you're taking a third degree of impurity and turning it into a first degree, is adding to Rabbi Krasnianski. Rabbi Krasnianski says you can take a third degree and elevate it, add it to a second, make it to a second degree. He says when you're burning it, since you're burning it anyway, so you can burn even if you are adding to the impurity from a third degree to a first degree. So that's one explanation. Another possibility of explaining it, the Gemara says that you can say that it's increasing from a third degree, which is puzzle, and turning it into a second degree. What's he adding to Rabbi Chanina's Kanakainu? In other words, it's not a metal candelabra, because the law of metal is only with a corpse, that anything metal comes in contact with a metal assumes the same level of impurity, whatever it touches. Right. If it touches a corpse. If it touches an avatuma, it becomes an avatuma. Right. So this metal candelabra is an avatum. So the oil you pour in becomes additional tumah. But if it's not metal, let's say it's a regular candelabra made from earthenware. Yeah. So when you pour the oil in, it's becoming a sheni, a secondary level. Grade. So that's what's Rabbi Kiva adding to Rabbi Chanina's Kanakainu. Chanina's Kanakainu already said that a third level you can up to a second level if you're burning it. The difference is there by truma it's tameh, because by kodshim, by the sacred leftover, the sacrifice, the sacrifice goes up to a fourth level. So it's tameh. Tameh means not only is it impure, it also has the ability to transmit impurity. Versus oil, which is only by truma, you don't have by kodshim. It's not a possibility. The shemen, oil of truma, oil of kodshim, you have to burn if it becomes tameh. You can't use it for a candelabra. So we must be talking about oil of truma. Oil of truma, it stops by the third level. It's called puzzle. It itself is disqualified, but it doesn't transmit. No longer has the power to transmit. So he's adding to Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Chanina's Kanakainu is saying you're allowed to take a lesser degree of tumah and elevate it to a higher degree of tumah. But they're both tumah. They both have the ability to transmit. How do I know I'm allowed to take shemen, which is puzzle, which is disqualified, but it doesn't have the power to transmit? How do I know I have the power to turn it into a sheni, and now it becomes tameh? Now it becomes not only it itself is disqualified, but now it has the power to transmit the tumah even further. So that's what Rabbi Akiva is adding. Okay, then the Mishnah says, Meir said, from their words, the Gemara will explain in today's Gemara which words is he referring to. From their words, whose words? Is it referring to Rabbi Chanina's Kanakainu and Rabbi Akiva, or is it referring to Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yeshua? So from their words we learn that, and that's why he brings the Mishnah here, because this is relevant to Pesach, that when you burn the chametz before Pesach, you're allowed to burn the truma that's pure together, which is chametz, together with the truma that's impure, even though you're contaminating the truma by burning them together. He says you don't have to burn them separately, two separate piles, you can burn them together. Right. Rabbi Yossi disagrees. Rabbi Yossi says, no, it's not true. You misunderstood them. Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yeshua everyone agrees that you have to burn the truma that's pure and the truma that's impure in a separate pile. The argument is truma that you're in doubt. You're not sure if it's pure or not, impure or not. That's the argument. Rabbi Lezer says even that should be burnt separately, because maybe it is pure and you're not allowed to mingle purity with impurity, because the Torah forbids you from causing impurity to truma. You have to watch the truma, make sure it doesn't become impure. Right. And Rabbi Lezer Yeshua says, no, since we're in doubt, and anyway you can't eat from it, and we're in doubt, and it's impure, we treat it like it's impure, and you can burn those two together. And Meir disagrees, he says, no, that according to Rabbi Yeshua, you would be even allowed to burn the truma tahira, even if it's 100% pure, mingle it together with the truma tamei, even though by mingling it, I'm causing it impurity. Okay, so that was the Mishnah. And then the Gemara discussed, we said, what's Rabbi Akiva adding? And we had the two explanations, whether it's talking about the candelabra is made of metal or the candelabra is made of earthenware and not from metal. And then the Gemara asks, we started learning yesterday, the two dots. You know, so let's go back there, because it starts the whole Gemara here. 14b, the two dots. Okay. The seventh line from the bottom. Which words? What's he basing it on? Meir says, from their words I can deduce this is what we're supposed to do by chametz. You can burn all the chametz together. Which words? Medibir Rabbi Chanina's kana kohenim. He's saying from the words of, how could you compare? Midami, how could you compare? Hasam there, tameh v'tameh. There, they're both impure. Yes, it's a third degree level of impurity, and now you're elevating it to a second degree, but they're both impure. How could you say from there I learned that I'm allowed to burn and mingle truma, which is tar, which is 100% pure, and burning while I'm burning it, it should mingle and become contaminated, mingle it with truma that's tameh? How do you learn that? How do you derive that from the words of Rabbi Chanina's kana kohenim? There it's tameh and tameh, hache tar v'tameh. Well, you must say, Rabbi Kiva, so you say, oh, maybe the words of Rabbi Kiva, but also not. Midami, how could you compare? Hasam, they're pasul v'tami. There, the truma, the shemen is a shlishi. So yes, it cannot transmit, can no longer transmit the truma, but it's pasul. How do you learn from that? How do you derive from that I'm allowed to burn truma, which is pure, together with truma, which is not pure, mingle it together and cause it to become impure? Hachatar v'tami. And for the Gemara, name I'll say, Kasavar Rameir holds, Rameir understood, Masnissen ba'avatuma deraisa vladatuma derabanan. When he said that you're allowed to, he learns from their words, he's referring to the words of Rabbi Chanina's kana kohenim. But when Rabbi Chanina's kana kohenim says you're allowed to burn the kachim that's impure together with the kachim that's a vlad, so the avatuma it's biblically impure, because there's no such thing, there's no avatuma midrabanan, there's no such thing avatuma midrabanan. Any source of tuma is biblical.
Right.
But a vladatuma, an offshoot of tuma, we have many cases where the rabbis said it's tameh, even though biblically it's pure.
Right.
For example, a utensil that becomes impure by touching liquid that was impure. Biblically, liquid, food and liquid cannot impart impurity on a utensil. Only question is, could it impart impurity on other food items?
Right.
It's also an argument whether biblically food could impart impurity with other items. But surely not on a utensil. Even liquid cannot impart utensil. But the rabbi said that if impure liquid touches a utensil, the utensil becomes pure. Then the utensil touched food, and the food became impure. So this whole impurity is only rabbinic. In other words, biblically it's pure. And Rabbi Chanina's kana kohenim says, I'm allowed to burn. I have to burn it. Now that it's impure, I have to burn it. So he said, I'm allowed to burn the sacred sacrifice that became impure biblically. It touched an avatuma, source of tuma, which is makes it biblically impure. Right. I'm allowed to burn it with a vladatuma, which is only rabbinic, meaning biblically it's pure. And the Torah forbids me from contaminating. I'm not allowed to take a kachim or truma and contaminate it. And here, Rabbi Chanina's kana kohenim says, since you're burning it anyway, I don't care. I don't care if it becomes contaminated. So that's what Rabbi Meir says. From the words of Rabbi Chanina's kana kohenim, I deduce that by burning the chametz, it's the same thing. I could burn the chametz, that's the truma that's pure, together with the truma that's not. That's how. That's what the Gemara wants to answer. Amar Reish Lakish, so we're up to my Divrei Chanina's kana kohenim. Amar Reish Lakish, 15a, the second line. Reish Lakish disagrees. Reish Lakish says no. Shum kapara. Masnisim ba'avatuma deraisa v'latuma deraisa. No, he didn't. Rabbi Meir doesn't derive his law from Rabbi Chanina's kana kohenim. Rabbi Chanina's kana kohenim is talking about a case where it's biblically impure. A vlad tuma mideraisa. And therefore, you can't derive from the law of Rabbi Chanina's kana kohenim to our law, because they're both tameh. All you're doing is you're upping the degree of impurity, but it's already impure.
They're both impure.
You're both impure, and they both could impart impurity. You're just upping the level. So there he allowed. You can't derive from there that you're allowed to burn the truma that's pure. It should mingle together with the truma that's impure. So where did he derive it from? He derived it from Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yeshua. So the Gemara says, "Hey Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Yeshua." Hey Rabbi Yeshua, because it's mainly from Rabbi Yeshua. The Mishnah brings in Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yeshua like in the middle. The Mishnah says.
Well, actually, okay, so I understood that Rabbi Elazar and Yeshua are basically arguing with the statement of Rabbi Meir.
He says, Rabbi Elazar and Yeshua agree. No, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi are arguing in Rabbi Yeshua. And he argues, he says, no, you misunderstood it. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yeshua only agree in this case. What case are we talking about here? The Mishnah is not telling us what Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yeshua said. Right. They're discussing Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yeshua. We have no idea where's Rabbi Elazar? Where did Rabbi Elazar say? Where did Rabbi Yeshua say? Which Mishnah are we referring to? So he says, Elaine, if you're going to want to say, Rabbi Yeshua is referring to this following Mishnah. It's not we learned later on our track. Chav Ishel Truma. And in Bechayr it says, Chav Ishel Truma. You have a barrel of Truma. Shenelad Lasafik Truma. Maybe it's impure. We're not sure. Right. An impure person came in. We're not sure. Did he touch it? Didn't he touch it? We're not sure. Rabbi Elazar says, if it was in an open place, which is more liable to become impure, you should hide it, cover it up. Because maybe it's pure, and if it's pure, you have to protect it. The Torah tells you, obligates you have to protect it to make sure that something is pure, is not allowed to become impure. So
we don't know what it is.
If it's already impure, I don't care. It's already impure, but I don't know. Maybe it's pure, so you have to protect it.
Hide it.
Let's hide it. Yeah, cover it up.
Right, okay.
If it's open, if it's revealed, the cover is off. The cover it. Rabbi Shua says no. If it's placed in a place that's hidden, on the contrary, expose it. Let it become for certain impure. So, you know, before you burn it, make sure it's, on the contrary, make it more likely that now you'll know for certain. Okay. If it's covered, remove the cover, you got lena. So we see, so maybe he learned it from Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua says that even there you're in doubt. He says you can go ahead and open it up and cause impurity. So that explains, from there we can derive, you're allowed to burn the truma that's pure together, the chametz truma that's pure together with the chametz truma that's impure. So Gemara says, no, midam mi hasam, how can you compare our mission, our case of chametz, burning chametz to there? Hasam there, grama ba'alma. I'm not causing the impurity, I'm just revealing it, making it more susceptible to impurity. And that's allowed. How do you derive from there that I'm allowed to take with my hands and mingle it together and cause it when the Torah says you're not allowed to cause impurity to Truma? Ella, only Rabbi Yeshua. He's referring to this following mission in Trumas. Now we learn the upper part of the wine press, there's a barrel of Truma that's pure and it broke. And it's in danger, it's about to spill into the lower pit of the lower part of the wine press. And what do you have in the lower part of the wine press? The wine in the lower part is chulin, it's not truma, but it's tameh. What's going to happen once the two wines mingle? Then the truma is going to become impure, and it'll become forbidden for everyone. Because unless you have a mixture of 100 to 1, if you mix truma with non-truma, they're both prohibited. So the whole thing will now become like truma, and because it's truma tmeya, even the kohen is not allowed to drink from this wine. So you're going to ruin, you're going to spoil, you're going to lose all this wine. So what do? Are you allowed to stop? Are you allowed to stop the wine to flow and to ruin and destroy the wine below? How are you going to stop it? The problem is all the vessels and utensils I have are impure. So if I'm going to stop it by capturing it in barrels that are impure and stop the wine from reaching the lower part, I'm going to cause the wine of Truma to become Tameh. But the question is, it's going to be ruined anyway. What am I saving? I'm not saving anything. Anyway, it's going to go down, and once it flows to the bottom, if I don't do anything, it's going to become tamei anyway. It's inevitably going to reach the chulin, which is tamei. They're going to mingle, and then the truma is going to become tamei. So am I allowed to, or am I not allowed to?
Once it broke.
There it happens on itself. Here, am I allowed to take with my own hands and take a tameidik utensil, impure utensil, and save it? So here it depends. So he says, boy, the Rabbi Elazar and Yeshua, both Rabbi Elazar and Yeshua agree, admit, if you can run and find a revius, a little jug, a little cup, you can save one revius of wine impurity, Yatsa. Then if I can save at least one revius of wine, so not all the wine is inevitably going to become tameh. So therefore, I have no right to go ahead to save the chulin wine, to save the wine in the lower level. I have no right to go and contaminate the whole entire wine from the top of truma. So I have to let it flow down.
What would it help if you stuck your hand in it? I understand. What would it save?
No, if I hold in the cup, I
revius,
save the
I get it.
revius. That's
Fine.
it. So that's fine. So at least if I can
What am
save,
I not allowing?
I'm not allowed to stopping the whole wine from flowing downwards because if
How would I stop it?
I have vessels that are tameh.
Tameh vessels
I can
you can't
capture it
use,
with
you
vessels that are tameh and stop it.
Less of a level of tumor.
But then I'm causing the truma to become impure, which the Torah says you're not allowed
The
to.
upside of doing that, it's less of a level of tumor.
Upside, I'm saving all my wine.
No, isn't it going down into another place of wine?
No, but if I can stop it before it reaches,
So when it drops down there, it's also going to be usable wine.
it won't be usable.
Oh, what's the
It
problem?
becomes tameh. What do you mean?
It's the
My
vessel that's
vessel's
not.
also tummy. So what am I gaining?
No, but I'm saving all my wine, the chulin, because now once it mingles, I won't be able to. No one can eat the chulin. No one
the
can.
bottom.
Yeah, it becomes
bottom one is-
meduma. Yeah, no one can eat it. Not the kohen. Nobody. Even the kohen can eat it. Even a kohen and tumah can eat it. There's nothing you can do. You can't. It's tummy. You're not allowed to.
So we're saving the bottom one.
You're saving the bottom wine. So everyone agrees that if I can save at least the revius of the top wine,
have a
the
pure
truma,
vessel, you can
a
capture
pure
it,
vessel,
right,
then
yeah.
even though the rest is going to flow,
So
and the
get
rest of
some
the
of it.
wine is going to become ruined,
right.
ruined. It's a huge amount of wine. It's going to be ruined. The tough luck. Nothing you can do. I'm not allowed to contaminate with my hands. Contaminate the wine. But the argument in Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yeshua is
Even your hands
in
will make it
lav, if
impure.
he can save at least the revius. This is the argument. Rabbi Lezer says, nevertheless, let it flow, let it contaminate the lower wine, and you're not allowed to. The Torah doesn't allow you. You can't say it's going to be ruined anyway. Why shouldn't I stop it and contaminate it with my hands? Anyway, it's going to be ruined. No, that's not a calculation. If it ruins by itself, it's ruined by itself. It flows, but you don't have
can't
the
purposely-
right to take it purposely while it's pure to make it impure.
You're
Rabbi
supposed
Yeshua
to
says
guard
no.
it, actually, right?
You have to guard it. Rabbi Yeshua, amen. Rabbi Yeshua says no.
Yeah.
Afi tamena b'yad. Rabbi Yeshua says since anyway it's going to flow. It's inevitable.
Right.
Anyway it's going to become spoiled and ruined and impure.
Don't stick anything.
So let me at least save the wine on the bottom. Let me take the vessels and capture the wine before it reaches the bottom, and it makes a mess of everything. And that's what the Meir says. Based on the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua, I'll say the same thing about burning the chametz and Pesach. When I'm burning the truma that's pure, 100% pure, and I'm burning the chametz of truma which is impure, even though by mingling it together and burning it together, I'm going to cause with my hands, I'm causing it to become impure. It's going anyway. I have to burn it. It's like the same case. It's identical. Anyway, I'm going to burn it. Anyway, I can't eat it. I can't benefit. I have to burn it. So who cares? What do I care if I go and I make it impure with my own hands? If that's the case, if that's what he's basing on, if he's saying it's Rabbi Chanina's Kana Kohen, it means Rabbi Kiva agrees with Rabbi Chanina's Kana Kohen. Rabbi Kiva only adds Rabbi Chanina's Kana Kohen. So make sure midivreihem from their words. But if you're telling me that he's referring to, Rabbi Reish Lakish is saying he's not referring to Rabbi Chanina's Kana Kohen, because there it's talking about a Vlada Tumah Mederaisa. And there's no comparison to our case, which is pure Truma. But if he's learning it from Rabbi Yeshua, he should have said midvarav, from his single opinion, not midivreihem, from their opinion. And for the Gemara, from their argument, he means, not from the words of Rabbi Lezer, he means from their argument. They can now also prove to you, the Tani it says, Moide Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yeshua. Because later on in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi argues, and he says, Moide Rabbi Lezer agrees with Rabbi Yeshua. And he says, when does Rabbi Yeshua argue? Only in the case of Toli. Meaning Rabbi Meir based his words on Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Meir based his words on Rabbi Yeshua, so Rabbi Yossi responds, no, you misunderstood. That's only in the case of if it's totally, if it's a doubt. But if it's 100% pure, no one you're not allowed to. And Rab Nachman and Rabbi also agrees with Reish Lakish. that Masnis in the mission is talking about Bava Tumah Deraisa, Vlada Tumah Deraisa, so that Meir cannot derive his ruling from the opinion of Krasnianski Kainim, or my Medivreim, when he says Medivreim, it means Medivrei Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yeshua. Okay. Now the Gemara asks, Ace with Rav Nachman, Rav after Rav Nachman. We learned later on, Rabbi Yesi, Rabbi Yesi disagrees with Rabbi Meir, and he says you can't compare the two. It's not a good comparison. You can't derive our law from Rabbi Yeshua. Why? Rabbi say no. When the rabbis testified, Amahid, he's going back to Rabbi Krasnianski, and the rabbis testified.
Back to the story about the meat.
Yeah, right. We're going back to the story of the meat.
Yeah.
About the Kohanim and the Beis Hamikdash. What did they testify? If they testified on flesh, sacred flesh. Right. From the sacrifice that becomes impure with an offshoot of impurity. You're allowed to burn it in my How could you compare? There they're both tamei, they both could impart impurity. You're just upping the level of impurity. But still, maybe only then they allow. If you're going to save it, this from Rabbi Akiva, it says you're even allowed to take shemen of truma that becomes puzzle. That's a third degree, and you're allowed to burn it in the candelabra of a candelabra that touched the tamei maze. So, but still, is that puzzle? Was that tamei? Nevertheless, this is puzzle. Is tamei? At least it's puzzle. Yes, it cannot convey impurity, but at least it's puzzle. So therefore, maybe only then they allowed you to elevate it and to make it tamei. I also agree with you. I'm not arguing with you, Rabbi Meir, that if the truma becomes impure with an offshoot of truma, you're allowed to burn it with truma that became impure with the source of truma. Fine. But how? Who gives you permission to? How do you derive from there? I'm allowed to burn truma, which I'm in doubt.
In abeyance, they say.
With impurity. Maybe Eliyanav will come and it's pure. Maybe it's pure. How much more so pure? How do you derive from there? I'm allowed to burn truma that's pure with truma that's impure.
And Elijah will come and say
and
otherwise.
Even though, Rabbi Yesi continues, even though it's not relevant to our case, but nevertheless, to conclude, he says, he talks about the burning of a pigul. Pigul, if when the kohen has the wrong thoughts.
The wrong thoughts.
And noiser, and leftover of the sacrifice, past its due date.
Past the due
due
date.
time.
Next morning.
Yeah, vatame, and sacred meat that became impure. Mishame says, ein nisrafen ka'achas. Mishame says, you're not allowed to burn them together. The rabbi said that pigul and noiser become impure. If you touch them, they become impure. This is rabbinically impure. Why did the rabbis make the decree? Because the rabbis were worried that the kohanim are going to be lazy, so they won't eat it in time, or they're going to be negligent, they're going to have the wrong thoughts. So if you realize, for a kohen to become impure, you're out of business. So he's going to be careful. So the rabbis said that the pigul and the noiser are impure. So Beishamai says, so since you're not allowed to burn them together, because pigul and noiser are only impure rabbinically, versus sacred meat that became impure is biblically impure, so you can't mix it with pigul and noiser, even though they're prohibited, but they're pure. So you can't mix it biblically, they're pure. So you're not allowed to, when you burn, you have to burn all of them, but when you burn them, don't burn them together. Basil says, nisrafin ka'achad. Basil says, no. Even though it's only rabbinically impure, but since it's already impure, you can burn it together with the kachim, which is biblically impure.
Yeah.
So he says, when do we find that you're allowed to mix together? Only if at least it has a level of impurity, at least rabbinically impure. But to take truma, which is 100% pure, and he says even truma that I'm in doubt, maybe it's 100% pure. Eliyanav will come and tell me it's pure. So therefore, you're not allowed to mix the two together. So Rabbi Yossi argues with Rabbi Meir. So what do we see from this? You're telling me, Reish Lakish is telling me, and Rav Nachman agrees with him, and Rabbi, in the name of Rabbi, who also agrees with Reish Lakish, that the proof of Rabbi Meir was from Rabbi Yeshua, nothing to do with Rabbi Chanina's Kanakain. Here you see clearly not so. That Rabbi Yossi is assuming, Rabbi Yossi is arguing with Rabbi Meir because he says, because Rabbi Meir learned from Rabbi Chanina's Kanakain. If he learned from Rabbi Yeshua, come on, why is Rabbi Yossi arguing with Rabbi Meir and he's bringing in Rabbi Chanina's Kanakain? Rav Nachman answered, no, we're right. I agree with Reish Lakish. Rabbi Meir derives it from Rabbi Yeshua, nothing to do with Rabbi Chanina's Kanakain. Rabbi Yossi lavadaite. Rabbi Yossi thought, he assumed, to who savar, he assumed Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Chanina's Kanakain kabbalah. And that's why he asked, it doesn't make any sense. How do you derive this law from there? Amalei, and Rabbi Meir responded to Rabbi Yossi, no, you misunderstood me. I know me that Rabbi Yeshua coming. I learned it from Rabbi Yeshua. Because since Rabbi Yeshua says that you're allowed to, since it's going to be burnt anyway, since it's going to become tummy anyway, I'm allowed to save the wine, make it impure, even I'm actively making it impure. So to hear it, since I have to burn it anyway, it's chametz, I have to burn it anyway. So therefore, I don't mind that if they mingle together. And to this, Rabbi Yossi responded, I said, that's what you meant. Rabbi Yossi says, even that's not a proof, I disagree with you, you misunderstood them. So Rabbi Yossi responded, V'amalei, Rabbi Yossi responded, V'afil Rabbi Yeshua nami eni im namida. Even according to Rabbi Yeshua, it's not true. It's not. You can't compare the two. The Hamayda Rabbi Lezer Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Lezer Rabbi Yeshua would agree. Should say that you have to burn the truma that's pure and the truma that's impure. The chametz you have to burn it in two separate piles. Thinking about why? It is a comparison.
What does that mean?
Rabbi Yeshua says
only in the case of.
Oh, so Gemara asked, but it is a comparison. Over there he says you can burn it beyond. Mida. What do you mean there's no comparison? It is a comparison. Over there it's 100% the wine and the top part of the wine press is 100% pure. The trum is 100% pure, and you're taking a tummy vessel and you're capturing it. With your own hands, you're actively making it impure. Right. So what do you mean it's not a comparison? How's Rabbi Yossi responding? So Gemara says, shiny hasam. There's different. There's another issue here. Not only that the trum is going to become impure anyway. The trum is going to become impure anyway. That would not allow me. That alone would not allow me to take impure vessels and capture the truma with my own hands to make it impure. That's biblically prohibited. Right. And the same thing here with the chametz. Right. Even though it's going to spoil anyway, if I let it go, inevitably it's all going to be spoiled. Right. Here also, anyway, I have to burn it anyway. Nevertheless, it doesn't give you the right, biblically, to mingle and with your own hands to contaminate truma that's pure. There, he allowed it for a different reason. There's another element. What's the element? The element is there's a huge financial loss. But over here, not. There's also a loss here. The eitzim. If you have to make two separate fires, you're losing wood. Why don't you just burn it together? And like this, you save on wood. One fire. So the elderly answered, no, they're talking about a huge amount of oil, wine, it's going to become impure, right, all that. Here, a little wood, come on. Here, a little wood, a little coal, that doesn't give you a right, that doesn't justify for you to make the truma impure with your own hands. Okay, very clear, right? Okay, so far so good. The argument is only on the 6th hour, 11 o'clock, when you burn it at 11 o'clock. If you're burning it, if you didn't have a chance, you didn't burn it when you're supposed to burn it. And now it's 12 o'clock noon. And you're biblically obligated to burn the chametz. Divrei hakel seifin. Even Rabbi Yossi agrees that you're allowed to burn the truma tahira, the chametz truma that's pure, mingled together with the truma that's impure in the same fire, even though you're contaminating. Amalei Rabbi Ravasi said Ravasi name. Should we say Kasav Rabbi Yechanan holds? Masnisim baba tumad reise baba lada tumad rabbanon. In other words, Meir Rabbi Yochanan is of the opinion that where did Rabbi Meir learn his law from? Not like Rish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan argues with Rish Lakish and with Rabbi Nachman. He says that Rabbi Meir derived the law of Chametz from Rabbi Chanina's Kana Kohanim, who allows you to burn the sacred that became impure from a source of tumah with the sacred katan that became impure from an avlada tumah. And that's why Rabbi Yochanan says they're only arguing about the 11 o'clock, because 11 o'clock is only rabbinically prohibited. You only have to burn it rabbinically. So that's a comparison. Just like Rabbi Chanina's Kana Kohanim allows you to burn a vladatum with a sacred that became impure from a source of impurity. So too over here, Rabbi Meir says you also have Rabbi Meir's of the opinion that even though it's 11 o'clock, it's only rabbinically prohibited. Nevertheless, you're allowed to mingle the two together and cause impurity. But if it's 12 o'clock, noon, and then it's biblically obligated to get rid of it, then even Rabbi Yossi would agree that you're allowed to burn them together. And that explains why Rabbi Meir says only 11 o'clock. I mean, Rabbi Yochanan said only 11 o'clock. Rabbi Yochanan was specific. In other words, 10 o'clock, if you want to burn it before, like our custom, we burn it before 11 o'clock. He's saying if you burn it before 11 o'clock, even Rabbi Meir would say you're not allowed to do it. Why? If the reasoning is like Rabbi Nachman just said, and if the reasoning is like Rabbi Nachman just said, and Reish Lakish, because anyway it's going to be ruined. What do I care if I burn it at 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock? What difference? Anyway, it's ruined. I'm going to have to burn it. So if you burn it earlier, you should be allowed to mingle. Rabbi Meir says only. Rabbi Yochanan says only 11 o'clock. So the fact that he says only 11 o'clock means he holds like the Gemara understood in the beginning, that he derives it from Rabbi Chanina's Kana Kohanim. So only of Vlad, only if it's 11 o'clock when it's rabbinically prohibited, only then he allows you to mingle. And if it's 12 o'clock, it's biblically everyone holds you allowed to.
Right.
But not before 11 o'clock. Right. If you burn it before 11, I'm not allowed to mingle the two. Neima, do you want to say, again inside, Neima, do you want to say Kasava Rabbi Yochanan Masnisim Bavatuma de Reise, Vlada Tuma de Rabbanon, Maid Midivrem, Dibri Rabbi Chanina's Kana Kohanim? Amalei, yes, that's exactly what Rabbi Yochanan is saying, only 11 o'clock. Itmer Nama, we also learned Rabbi Yochanan Masnisim Bavatuma de Reise, Vlada Tuma de Rabbanon. And then he said, how did he understand? He understood it because he learned that what's Rabbi Akiva adding to Rabbi Chanina's Kana Kohanim? Because Rabbi Akiva is adding that even though we're talking about Vlada Tumah, which is only Midrabanan, and therefore, and biblically it's allowed. Biblically it's pure. And nevertheless, you're allowed to, so too over here, so Sheish, when it's a Isser D'Rabbanan, he compares Isser to Tumah. Whenever there's a Isser D'Rabbanan, it's like a Vlada Tumah D'Rabbanan, and that allows me to mingle it, but not before 11. Aval B'Sheva, when it's biblical, they would hakel sefer. He says, yeah, Enochanam. He says, Lema Messiah, let's say that this helps him out, this proves it. We learn a pigel van neiser vatamei. Right? We just had this. Pigel and neiser and tamei. B'shameyim remain nesrafin k'asham. He says you can't burn them together. Or b'sileim nesrafin k'achas. So even though it's only impure, it's only rabbinically impure, pigel and neiser, Beis Hillel says you're allowed to burn them together. Yeah. So that's the opinion. That's what Rabbi Meir says. You're allowed, 11 o'clock, you're allowed to burn it together, even though it's only rabbinically prohibited. Yeah, but the Gemara, no, shiny hasim, there is different. This is l'tumah with the Rabbanan. There, it's tamim with the Rabbanan. Dit na pigel van noisim mit hamen and sayadayim. First, we thought only because it's prohibited. The fact that it's prohibited is enough to allow me to burn it together with tumah. So too, the fact that at 11 o'clock it's prohibited, it becomes chametz, midrabanan, I'm not allowed to even benefit from it. Therefore, I'm allowed to burn it. He says, no, there it's tumah. But how do I know from there that the truma, which is 100% pure, I'm allowed to mingle with truma that's not pure just because it's prohibited? Don't mix prohibition with tumah. Lema Messiah, let's say this proves this point.
Let's see, the Gemara suggests.
supports Rabbi Yochanan. We learned hapash she'ipsha v'nifsala.
Moldy. It
Bread
gets
that
moldy.
grows moldy.
No fit.
V'nifsala melech lodin. It's not fit
But
for
a
human
dog-
consumption.
but a
Like
dog
kelev
is-
yachal, like the dog is still eating from it. So it still imparts impurity, because once it becomes impure, the impurity doesn't leave it. So it still imparts impurity if it has the size of an egg. V'nisrefes imatmeya. B'Pesach. And you're allowed to burn it together. You're allowed to burn it together with tameh, even though it's pure. If it's pure, I'm allowed to burn it together with tameh, even though by mingling it together, it's going to become impure. So this follows the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Meir says I'm allowed to burn even chama, even truma that's pure. That's edible. He says even edible truma I'm allowed to burn. Rabbi Yossi says, but Rabbi Yossi admits that if it's inedible, even though it's tarred, it's pure, I'm allowed to burn it together with the tameh. Why? Since it's inedible, therefore I'm allowed to even contaminate it with my own hands. So from this we can arrive at this, that surely Rabbi Yossi agrees also that if it reaches 12 noon, when it's biblically prohibited,
Right.
so it's also unfit for consumption. It's the same idea, it's unfit for consumption. If Rabbi Yossi admits, Rabbi Yossi, who argues with Rabbi Meir, who says that truma that's pure, I'm not allowed to mingle, I'm not allowed to burn together with truma that's impure. But he admits if it's inedible, I'm allowed to burn it together, even though it's pure. So surely, if it's noon, which is it's inedible because biblically I'm not allowed to eat from it, so surely I'm allowed to burn it. That supports Rabbi Yochanan's opinion that even Rabbi Yossi would agree with Rabbi Meir that truma that's pure, even though it's physically edible, but since biblically it's inedible, I'm not allowed to eat from it, that I can burn it together with truma that's impure. So Yimara says, no, how could you compare?
Said there's even machlekes after the 7th hour?
Well, Rabbi Yochanan is the only one who says it. It doesn't say in the Mishnah. The Mishnah doesn't make any such distinction.
Got it. Okay. Just trying to-
What's the difference? Rabbi Yossi says you're not allowed to cause impurity. You have to burn it, make a separate fire. Maybe it also includes 12 noon. Rabbi Yochanan's chiddush. So he says this supports his opinion. The Gemara says no, you can't bring this to support. Shiny awesome, there's different. The afra ba'almahu. The reason he allows it because since it's inedible, it's nothing. It's like offer. So I'm not causing any impurity. It's not food anymore.
Not food anymore.
So how do you prove from there that 12 o'clock it's inedible? What are you talking about? Since it's physically edible, I'm not allowed to cause purity. Burn it, but burn it in a separate fire and separate wood. In fact, if that's the case, my moida hache. My moida, what do you mean he agrees? Where do you see Rabbi Yossi agrees? This is what Rabbi Yossi says to Rabbi. No, the Gemara says, if that's the case, that Meir, according to Rabbi Yochanan, Meir derives his opinion from Rabbi Krasnianski. So what's Rabbi Yossi bringing in Maida? According to Rabbi Nachman and Rabbi Shlakish, we understand, because that's the whole source. But if he learns of Rabbi Krasnianski, why are you bringing in the Maida? What does it have to do with our case?
We were talking about that.
Yeah. This is what Rabbi Yossi says to Rabbi Meir. I feel Rabbi Yeshua the Mekel, even Rabbi Yeshua was lenient. Keep Mekel, when is he lenient? But Luyo, it's May, is only lenient if it's a doubt and if it's a
Doubtful
certain
truma,
tameh.
yeah,
But
with
potato,
that
tameh,
But pure and pure, no.
pure and pure, no.
So he was attacking back at Mayor. You're saying you're saying Rabbi kind of goes like you, but nobody goes like you.
All right. If that's the case, if Rabbi derived his ruling from Krasnianski, what's Rabbi Yossi say? It's not analogous. It is analogous. Because you said that if it's the 12th hour, even Rabbi Yossi agrees, you're allowed to burn. So even Rabbi Yossi agrees that impurity, and prohibition go hand in hand. If the Torah says it's prohibited, then it's the equivalent of being impure. And therefore you can burn it together. And you explained that Krasnianski Kohenim is saying that even meat that was tummy rabbinically, I'm allowed to burn together than meat that was tummy biblically. So this proves the point that 11 o'clock, which is prohibited rabbinically, should also allow me to burn at 11 o'clock together with the tumah. So midu midihi, Rabbi Yechna says, hach over here, b'basar shenitma b'mashkin shenitma machmasheretz. Rabbi Chanina's testimony was referring to an argument in Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi. We're talking about meat that became impure from liquid that became impure because the liquid touched a dead mouse. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the argument whether liquid could impart impurity, whether liquid could impart impurity to food. And that's biblically. And that's an argument in Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Meir follows his reason. Rabbi Meir holds that the impurity of liquid, that it could transfer the impurity to others, is only rabbinic. Biblically, only the liquid could become impure, but it can't transmit the impurity to anything else. And we only rabbinically does it transmit to others. Rabbi follows his reasoning that biblically impure a liquid not only becomes impure, could also impart it to others. So that itself is the argument. Whether the Vlada Tumah Rabbi Krasnianski was talking about, this was the scenario. According to Rabbi Meir, it's only rabbinically prohibited. So therefore we see that anything that's rabbinically prohibited, you're allowed to mingle with something that's biblically impure. Right. And the same thing would be that even if it's only rabbinically prohibited, 11 o'clock, I'm allowed to burn them together. Right. Rabbi Yossi says, no, that scenario, the food becomes biblically impure. Only biblical. So only a biblical prohibition, 12 o'clock noon, when it becomes biblically prohibited, only then am I allowed to mingle, but not 11 o'clock when it's only rabbinic.
So you know what is Rabbi Krasnianski said?
No, the fact they're talking about the same fact, but what status does it have? We're talking about liquid that touched the sheretz. Tumas mashkin.
Which was metame something else. Food.
Yeah. And this tumas mashkin was mederaisa became tamei. It touched the sheretz. It touched avatuma. Right. But could the tumas mashkin transmit it? Is that a vlad mederabanan or vlad mederaisa? That's the argument. And the Tanya will learn, starts discussing this argument about liquid. What status does it have? To be continued. Yontif, everyone, a wonderful day. Let's daven mincha. Let's gather.